Dealing with being house broke is a significant challenge in personal finance, and many of us have faced this issue. To help future home buyers avoid this, I'm creating a video about responsible housing spending. When considering how much home can I afford, several rules of thumb exist. In this video, we'll examine the three main ones, discussing their pros and cons, and demonstrate how they fit within an overall budget. This will help you determine the most suitable rule for your financial situation. Can I afford this house? Is a question lots of folks ask. To figure it out, money experts have three simple rules to help. Let's talk about them. The first rule is the 28-36 rule. It says you should spend up to 28% of your total earnings on your mortgage, including insurance, taxes, and other costs. Then, the total amount you spend on your home and other debts, like car payments or student loans, shouldn't be more than 36% of your earnings. What's good about this rule is that it lets you buy a somewhat pricier home while keeping track of other debts you might have. Most of the time, if everything goes okay, you should manage these payments without trouble. But here's the catch. Following this rule means a big chunk of your money goes into paying off debts. That leaves less cash for other things like saving up for trips, paying off loans faster, or planning for the future. It's essential to understand that while these rules are handy guides, they don't consider your unique situation. They're like general suggestions that might not fit everyone. For instance, if you have other financial goals or unexpected expenses, these rules might not leave much room for those. So, when you're thinking about how many houses you can afford, these rules can help, but it's also smart to think beyond the rules. Consider your lifestyle, goals, and how comfortable you'll be with the payments. Maybe you'd rather aim for a smaller house to have more flexibility with your money. Or perhaps you're okay with spending a bit more because your income is likely to increase soon. Let's imagine John and Jane, who want to buy a new home. They earn $72,000 a year or $6,000 a month together, which is about the typical income in the US. Now, they also have some debts. $5,000 on a credit card costing $100 a month, $10,000 left on a car loan with a $185 monthly payment, and $30,000 in total student loan debt, having a $300 total minimum payment. When they add up all these debts, it amounts to $585 every month. This makes up around 9.75% of their overall income. Ideally, experts recommend that non-housing debts should be around 8% or lower of your income. So John and Jane are slightly above this recommendation. It means they might need to pay off some debts before buying a new home or think about adjusting how much they can spend on their housing. But this guideline is flexible and helpful. It's better than other rules because it considers their specific situation and helps them understand what might work best for their finances. Adjusting their debt or housing plans can help them make a better decision about buying a new home without struggling too much financially. Imagine John and Jane are thinking of buying a new house. If they choose not to pay off their existing debts before getting the new home, they shouldn't spend more than 26.25% of their total income on housing. This includes the mortgage, interest, taxes, insurance, and any related fees. Altogether, their debts and housing costs combined should not be higher than 36% of their total income. So, the maximum they could afford for the new house would be $1,575 per month, or $18,900 per year. How big a house they could buy depends on a few things. The interest rate they get on their loan, property taxes, and homeowners insurance where they want to live, how much they put down for the home, and if there are extra costs like private mortgage insurance or other fees. For example, if property taxes are around 1.5% of the home's value, homeowners insurance is $100 a month. They put down 20% so they don't need private mortgage insurance. There are no extra fees, and they get a 4% interest rate on the mortgage. They could afford a home worth about $270,000 with a 30-year loan, or a $190,000 home with a 15-year loan under these guidelines. So these 28-36 rules help them figure out what size of a home they can comfortably afford based on their income, existing debts, and how much they're willing to pay monthly and yearly for housing. The second rule people often use to figure out how much house they can afford is called the 30% solution. It's pretty straightforward. The idea is that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your total income on housing costs, which includes things like mortgage, utilities, and other housing-related expenses. The cool thing about this rule is that, out of the three we're talking about today, it lets you buy the priciest house. Let's use an example to make it clear. Imagine a couple, John and Jane, who together make $6,000 a month. According to the 30% solution, they can spend a maximum of $1,800 a month on housing. If we stick with the earlier scenario, this means they could buy a $335,000 home with a 30-year loan or a $235,000 home with a 15-year loan. Now, here's a potential downside. Unlike the 28-36 rule we discussed earlier, the 30% solution doesn't explicitly consider how the rest of your money is spread out. Sure, it suggests that no more than 20% of your take-home pay should go to non-housing debts, but it doesn't have a second layer like the 28-36 rule to help you adjust your housing costs if you're drowning in debt. Let's compare. The 28-36 rule would make you lower the percentage of your budget going to housing if your debts are higher than recommended. But the 30% solution doesn't offer such adjustments. If you strictly follow it, you'd still be putting 30% of your total income towards housing, potentially leaving you with very little wiggle room for other expenses. If you're thinking about retiring early or just want to be smart with your money, how much you spend on your home is crucial. There are different rules people use to figure out what they can afford. Let's break down three common ones. First, there's the 30% solution. This rule says that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your total income on housing. So if you make $6,000 a month, that's $1,800 for housing. It's like a guideline to help you decide what kind of house you can buy. The good thing is, it lets you go for a pricier home compared to other rules. But it doesn't pay much attention to the rest of your money situation, like debts. It suggests you keep non-housing debts under 20%, but it's not as detailed as some other rules. Now, if you want to play it safe, there's the 25% method. Dave Ramsey, a money expert, talks a lot about this one. It says you should spend no more than 25% of your take-home pay on housing. Take-home pay is what you get after taxes. So if you make $60,000 a year after taxes, you'd stick to $15,000 a year or $1,250 a month for housing. This is the most cautious rule. It's good if you have other financial goals like paying off debts or investing. But in pricier areas, finding a good place on this budget might be a bit tricky. And for those aiming for early retirement, the 30% solution might make things harder. Putting so much into housing could slow down your plan. That's where the 25% method might be your go-to. It keeps more money in your pocket for other goals. In a place where living costs are higher, like where John and Jane live, a small place can cost $1,500 a month, while bigger places could go up to $3,600 a month. John and Jane have a choice. They could rent the small place all by themselves for $1,500, covering all the extra expenses like utilities and internet. Or they could split the cost of the bigger place with others they trust. If they share the $3,600 three-bedroom apartment, each person will pay $1,200, and they divide other expenses among them too. It might be more manageable for them this way compared to going solo. They could also get creative with their housing situation. For instance, they could rent out rooms or parts of their place, maybe through a platform like Airbnb, to offset some of their housing expenses. These are just some ideas people use to figure out what kind of home they can afford in different situations where the costs are high. You might wonder if these rules work for everyone. Well, it's not that simple. These rules, like many others, can be a good starting point, but they might not fit every situation perfectly. They're like a general idea, not a definite answer. It's important to look deeper into your own money situation and consider everything involved in buying a house. There's more to it than just following a rule about how much to spend on housing. When you're thinking about buying a house, there are lots of other costs to think about too, like moving, buying furniture, or fixing things in the house, and other expenses that pop up when you're buying. These rules don't cover all of that. So it's a good idea to use these rules as a starting point, a basic guide to understand what to expect when it comes to housing costs. But after that, it's up to you to do some extra research. A house is a huge purchase for most people, so it's smart to be really careful. Do your own investigations to make sure you're not missing anything important. And if you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more.